Hello and welcome to the first episode of Nightmare Fuel. In this episode, we will be detailing 4 nightmarish experiences from Reddit users at night. This first story is by a Reddit user by the name of Hooker Mitzvah. Recently, I was taking the train home around 11 PM and reading on my phone. I get near my stop, look up, and notice a 20-year-old guy on the opposite end of the train looking at me. At least I thought he was 20 years old. He looked very young. He looked and dressed normal, had a neutral expression on his face, and looked away a moment after we made eye contact. But I don't know how else to explain it. I knew he was a bad person who had bad intentions towards me. It was like all his energy was directed towards me in a point. And although he was trying to look casual, I knew he was paying way too close attention to me, sizing me up. I knew he was going to try something. So I put away my phone, got a better grip of my bag and tried to look neutral and bored as my stop approached. When the doors opened at my stop, I sit there a beat too long to see if he's getting up. He doesn't. I quickly stand and exit the train. He suddenly jumps up and gets off the train too, just before the doors close, like he just remembered it's his stop. Shit, now I know it's going down. He's several steps ahead of me, walking towards the exit stairs. I walk behind him slowly, like comically slow. He slows down his gait too, doing ridiculous shit like stretching and just ambling around. I know he wants me to pass him so he can sneak up on me, but I want to keep an eye on him. Finally, I decide I'd rather pass him than be alone in a long empty subway tunnel at night with him. So I quickly pass him, out of arm's reach, and he follows me up the stairs. Even though he's acting casual, I can still feel his energy pointed at me, if that makes sense. I get to the top of the stairs and start walking towards the exit turnstile. He's a couple of steps behind me. There's subway employees here, but if I leave the subway, it will just be me and him on the street in my not very busy neighbourhood. I know he's following me, and I don't want him to know where I live, so I suddenly stop, turn around and look straight at him. He also suddenly stops, looks up at the ceiling, all innocent, real smooth, and after a second goes back down the other set of subway stairs, which will take him in the totally opposite direction he had been travelling. So either he suddenly realised he was totally lost, or he realised I wasn't going to let him rob me, or worse, and had to abort mission. I waited there for a few seconds to make sure he was really going back downstairs, and just before we hit the platform, he looked up and gave me the most evilest look. His veil of casual dropped completely, and he looked at me with pure hate. I actually just got chills thinking about it. I don't know what his plans were for the evening, but I fucked them up, and he hated me for it. I waited a few seconds on the exit stairs to make sure he wasn't coming after me, and walked home quickly, checking behind me the whole way. Worst part is, he probably just went looking for some other person to attack. This story may not be considered horror, but it is extremely strange. This next story comes from Ramses the Pigeon, who is also a Reddit user. Folks who have been to the Bay Area know better than to walk down Telegraph Avenue after dark. Back in 2004 or so, I was dating a young woman who was attending UC Berkeley. She and I had been on the rocks for a little while, and following a particularly heated exchange via an instant messenger, I'd rushed across Bay Bridge intent on apologising in person. It was about 9 at night, meaning that most, though certainly not all, of the evening traffic had subsided. But finding somewhere to leave my car was still something of an uncomfortable endeavour, and I wound up parking a good half a mile away from where I'd hoped to be. I eventually met up with my then girlfriend, at which point we had a slightly tense conversation, mostly made up, and then parted ways until the weekend. I was left with a few unaddressed concerns, but my mood had been generally elevated from the dark corner into which it had previously fallen. As such, I was feeling more receptive than might have been wise. And when an eccentric looking fellow stopped me on my way back to my car, I actually paused in my path to interact with him. The guy had waist-length dreadlocks extending from his head, and they were draped around his torso in lieu of an actual shirt. In his hands, he was holding a large conch shell that I'd ever seen. It was the biggest I had ever seen. "Hey," the man said, "will you spit in this for me?" I looked from the shell to the fellow's eyes a few times and said, why? I just want you to spit in it for me. Will you do that?" He held the object a little bit closer to my mouth. "No, really," I said, leaning back. "Why do you want me to do that?" A wide grin broke out over the guy's face. "It's just a thing. Will you spit in it for me?" For a brief moment, I considered what possible motivation this stranger could have for wanting a sample of my saliva. My mind ran through a handful of scenarios, ranging from the idea that I was on a hidden camera show to a few possibilities that would have been best left in a bad science fiction novel. Well, I finally replied, struggling to offer my own smile. "Sorry, but I don't think I'm going to do that." "Please." He held the shell even closer. It smelled, as I recall, rather strikingly like the corpse of a skunk that had been frolicking in a compost pile. With a sigh and a roll of my eyes, I leaned forward and offered a mostly dry expectoration in the general direction of the seashell. "Thanks," the guy said. He gave me another cheerful smile, then wandered off into the night. I walked the rest of the way back to my car feeling very confused and a little bit paranoid. But I ultimately chalked it up to one of those things that only happens in the Bay Area. Still, sometimes I wonder about that shell. This next story comes from CO74. He is also a Reddit user. About 20 years ago, I was driving home from a late wedding DJ gig. I was driving south on a major interstate which was relatively empty at 2:30 a.m. or so. At one point in the Narrows, the retaining walls on each side get very high as the highway snakes underneath overpasses. Out of nowhere, a young woman jumped down from the retaining wall onto the highway and directly in front of me. I hit the brakes hard, came to a complete stop and nearly slammed into her. She looked up, ran to my passenger door and got in looking terrified. She looked between 16 and 20 years old, long blonde hair, and her clothes looked a little dirty. Not homeless dirty, but like she'd fallen down a few times. "I just need to call my mum," she said. I tried to calm her down and began moving back down the highway, and behind me, about 50 feet, I see another figure jump down onto the highway out of my rearview mirror. I didn't mention this to her, and she didn't look back or see the other person. I sped up and went about 4 or 5 exits south. She kept saying over and over, "I just need to call my mum." This was before most people had cell phones, so I told her I would take her to one of the 24-hour grocery stores and she could call her mum. I asked her if she needed money for a payphone, what was wrong, etc. She said nothing other than, "I just need to call my mum." I pulled up to the grocery store and stopped. She got out quickly but not running and ducked into the grocery. She didn't say a word to me or look back. I pulled into the gas station across the street and called 911 and told them the entire story and let them know the young woman was inside the grocery store and the description of her. I have no idea what happened. I don't know why she did that, what happened to her, who the figure behind us in the highway area was. Nothing really made me super uneasy. But this did. I did the right thing. I would have tried to do more, but she seemed really fragile emotionally and somewhat afraid of me. I am a guy. So I wanted her to be able to get where she needed to be. And I hope she did. This next story comes from Choking Mr. Elmo on Reddit. One night at around midnight a year ago, a man pulled into my driveway in an SUV. My driveway is quite large and loops around, and he parked with his headlights set to bright and pointed towards my front door. My front door was open and just a locked screen door between us. Since it was close to midnight and he parked so strangely, I grabbed one of my handguns before heading to the door to double check that it was locked. I considered closing the actual door, but if they were there to rob me, they already knew I was home. Plus, they could just be in need of assistance. I set my handgun next to the front door close enough that I could grab it in under a second and out of view from the outside. A man stepped out of the SUV, which caused the interior lights of the car to turn on. And through the brights I could just barely see that he wasn't alone. The man approached my front door and greeted me. I asked why he was in front of my home, and he said he was looking for a friend's house. I advised that he wasn't at the right place and that he should continue on down the road to find the residential area he was probably looking for. He said he came from that direction and reiterated that he was looking for a friend's house. He had a smartphone in his hand, so I suggested that he use it to call his friend for directions. He gave me an excuse about how his friend wouldn't pick up, so I suggested he type his friend's address into Google Maps and follow the directions to get there. He said he tried that, but he couldn't get it to work. He asked me to come in outside of my house at midnight to help him type an address into Google Maps. I obviously refused. I said, "Look, bud, it's almost midnight. I don't know you, and you're insistent that I unlock my door and come outside to help you with something a toddler could do." He responded, "Hey man, don't call the police. I'm a military vet and I just need some help. So can you please come outside and help me?" Now I feel I should state here that up to this point the police had not been mentioned at all. So obviously telling me not to call the police made me want to call the police. I put one hand on my gun before informing him that I would be calling the police and that he should leave before that happens. He started to protest, but I pulled out the gun and used the side of the barrel to close my actual door. I just wanted to show him that I was armed, but I didn't want to escalate things further by pointing a gun at him. He fled while I called the cops, but nothing ever came of it. Then 6 months ago, my neighbour ran into a similar situation. SUV, multiple men. Only he was asleep when they showed up. A man rang his doorbell close to midnight. He got up and opened his front door without really looking to see who was there. As soon as he did, a man that had been standing to the side of the door, out of sight, pointed a shotgun to his head and walked him back into his own house. He sat there for hours with a shotgun pointing at his head, while multiple men robbed him. They didn't shoot him, but they did clean him out. He lost everything: jewelry, cash, credit cards, guns, TVs, computers, you name it, he lost it. They even made him give him his PIN number and drove to go test it while he was still being held at gunpoint. I don't know for sure that they were the same people, but if you wanted to get someone into a position to pull the same maneuver at my house, knowing that the homeowner was watching, blinding them with the brights of an SUV would be a damn good way to do it. Well, that's it for the 4 scariest nighttime stories. Thank you for watching the first episode of Nightmare Fuel. Subscribe for more and regular great content. And once again, thanks for listening.